Yeah, and I've learned so many things from you. Like, there's just so many things. Like, that's the great thing about your program because it's not just about stopping drinking, which I did, right? But it's like discovering, it's like discovering all these new things. Like, there's so many things that I've learned from your podcast that I haven't even tried yet.
Thanks for tuning in to the Elevation Recovery Podcast, your hub for addiction recovery strategies, hosted by Chris Scott and Matt Finch.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Chris Scott. This is the Elevation Recovery Podcast. And today we have a really cool episode. I'm here with JohnnyO. I'm going to call you JohnnyO because that's how you introduced yourself to me in the email, online, and all of that. Really cool guy who lives in Hawaii. And he's going to share some of his really inspiring story today. You look great, JohnnyO. You're glowing. You've got the backdrop of some Hawaiian shrubbery and scenery. Looks like a beautiful day out there. Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks. Yeah, I got my avocado tree in the back. I just actually got finished picking all the avocados off it, believe it or not, and it's January.
Yeah, well, how warm is it out there?
It's pretty nice.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we're waiting for it to warm up a little bit in Savannah. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how you started drinking? I guess we'll start at the beginning of your story because you've had a transformation here. But what drew you to alcohol in the beginning and how did you get into it?
Sure. And it's a pretty long story. I've had a long history with alcohol. I'm actually 61 years old. And so I had a 40-year relationship with alcohol, 40 years. And it started, like when I was around 17, 18. And, I'm originally from Pennsylvania, kind of the Philadelphia kind of area. And I lived a good portion of my life there till I was about 40 or so. But yeah, so started when I was 18 and, just beers with the guys. I drank beer pretty much, for a long, long time. And, at that time, in New Jersey, the drinking age was 18, and where I was in Pennsylvania was 21. So I discovered I could take little trips. There was about an hour drive to a little town called Milford, New Jersey, and I used to go there and get cases of beer and then bring them back over to Pennsylvania. So that's kind of how I started to work around the system during those couple of years when I was kind of 18 through 21. And, I kept doing that, going to Milford, get a case of beer. And then eventually I found this little bar in Milford, New Jersey. And I used to sit in the bar and I would go there in the daytime, right? And sit there like in good afternoon, right? Get into the evening. Pretty much when it started to get dark, I might kind of drive home. And boy, I'll tell you, I mean, I don't know how I made it home. I mean, we're talking an hour drive, right? And so one night I left that little bar in Milford, New Jersey, and I woke up and I was in my car and I was on someone's lawn. And I mean, like, my car was in the middle of this guy's lawn. I didn't know where I was at. I had a feeling I was still in New Jersey because I don't think I drove very far before I pulled over. And it was morning. So I look on my windshield and there's this note, and I kept the note. I still have this note to this day. And the note, I'll show it to you. This note says, "Bert, this guy is drunk. Let him sleep. Dan."
That's a hell of a note. Sounds like a nice guy.
Oh, I mean, he was a great guy, right? Who would do that? So I kept this note, at the time it was like funny, right? And I kept it. But, now looking back on it, I can still laugh about it now. But this was really a call to me because it was telling me, hey, John, you just blacked out. You were drinking and you encountered a blackout. And so this note, as profound as it is, never really hit me in that way. But that was my first sign that I didn't recognize, that I didn't realize. I was blacked out. So So I kept drinking in my younger years and just pretty much beer. And I was pretty much a weekend warrior, like in my 20s. I would go Friday and get my case of beer. That's all I could afford back then, right? Get my case of beer, drink that case over the weekend, and be done with it for sure by Monday, and just go back to work.
Were you
And
drinking alone or with other people?
a little of both. It was definitely both. Yeah, I was definitely social, but there were times I can remember, where I was alone, but so I pretty much drank that entire case for the most part. Friends came over, maybe they'd bring beer, whatever, but yeah, it was definitely it was a little of both. There was social drinking. Like I used to hang out with my friends on the weekend, and we used to just drink all weekend, every weekend. And during my 20s, there were things that we got into that allowed us to pretty much stay up and drink, the entire weekend.
Mhm.
And I had some pretty bad Mondays in those years in my 20s. So, I kept going in my 20s, and around that time, cocaine was really popular. Dabbled in that. Um, dabbled dabbled more. I stayed a weekend warrior, but it was something that was not good. So and then I got married, and then I had a newborn come along. So when that newborn came along, my son, uh, my wife, she was a partier too. She had put it aside. Of course, she got pregnant. She did the right thing, and then she kind of walked away from that sort of life. But I was still stuck in that life, and I had a newborn. So she put up with me for a little while, and eventually she left, went back to her parents with my son. So um, that really hit me hard, and so I did go to a rehab, and I was in a 30-day inpatient rehab, and I got out, and I lasted about 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and but then by a miracle, what I did was after that, I joined a gym, and I had never belonged to a gym. And in this gym, they had racquetball courts there, and I started playing racquetball, and I got really into it, super into it, and that actually is kind of what got me to stop drinking. And I didn't drink for like 5 years. I stopped drinking for like 5 years.
How old were you at the time?
I was in my early 30s at this time. Yeah. So in a sense, I was doing a sort of a fit recovery program on
Mhm.
my own in a way, right? Um, so then after the 5 years, I was at a baseball game one day with a friend and decided I was going to have a beer. And so I did. And so I started drinking again. But, during those years, had my son. Um, I really kept it under control. Like I didn't binge drink or anything like that. Um, it didn't present any problems for me at work or any like family issues or anything. So in my 30s, I was pretty good. And then towards the end of my 30s, I went to the doctor one day. I said, "Doctor, you know, I knew I had something. I knew I had a problem with alcohol. Like I knew I had something, right? And I did want to like kind of stop. Um, and at that time, I was still sort of that weekend warrior kind of guy. So I went to the doctor and said, "Hey, doc, um, I drink on the weekends, and at the end of the week, Friday, I just want to just have a drink, and then sometimes on the weekend, I drink a lot more than I want to." And I was like, is there anything that you could help me with that might sort of help me curb that scenario? And he goes, "Oh, so you mean like a cocktail?" And I'm like, Yeah. So he prescribed me Xanax.
Ooh,
And this was in 1997. So this was before, Xanax really became sort of this monster thing. So here's a doctor. And again, this was before Xanax really turned into a monster. Here's a doctor. I tell him I drink too much. He prescribes me Xanax. He didn't address anything about my alcohol issue, right? He gave me Xanax instead. And I think back to that. Wow, that's crazy. I mean, because if that's how Whitney Houston died, as you probably know.
did
She
he
drank.
did give you instructions? I'm just curious. I mean, at the time, was he like, look, if you want to drink, maybe take one Xanax and be very careful and don't take more, if you have anxiety. Typically, that's the legitimate use for Xanax is acute anxiety.
Yeah,
Um, but I
yeah.
feel like it should come with a hefty disclaimer, as all
I didn't get a
benzodiazepines
hefty
should.
disclaimer.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, I didn't get a hefty disclaimer,
Yeah. Okay.
but he did prescribe me, a fairly low dose. I think it was like 1 milligram, which is pretty minimum dose. Um, and actually, for quite a few years, quite a while, that did the trick for me. I didn't really ever go over the dose. A lot of times I just took half, at nighttime or whatever. Um, and I took Xanax for quite a number of years, probably like 10, 15 years.
How often were you taking it?
Kind of every day eventually. It was like every day. Started with the weekend, but eventually over the years it got to every day. Um, so then so then 2005, I'm about 40 now. 45. I left Pennsylvania, moved to Florida. And in Florida, I lived there for 1 year and I didn't drink at all in Florida. You know how they say, the thing is, sometimes when you move somewhere else, it kind of worked for a little while, but that really doesn't work. And I can tell you why, but, that concept doesn't really work. Um,
But it is interesting that you didn't drink for a whole year. I mean, for a lot of
yeah,
people with alcohol cravings or struggling with this, I've heard from people who have been drinking since they were 12. They can't imagine going a day without it, much less a year. So there's something that you must have been doing right, or at least, the power of what you focus on. If you feel what you focus on is one of my favorite sayings. And if you're not focused on alcohol or the absence of alcohol, all of a sudden time passes. An entire lifetime can potentially pass. But then again, if you don't understand alcohol or the nature of the addicted brain, then if you decide to heavily get back into it, you can find yourself in big trouble.
absolutely. Yeah. And that was exactly what it was. I had things around me. I basically spent my whole life in Pennsylvania wanting to leave Pennsylvania. So here I was in this new place. I was lived by the ocean. I was living in Miami Beach. I had so much activities. I was still playing racquetball. I could play outdoors, and I was working out, healthy, and it was warm, and had the ocean. So yeah, I had all of those distractions. So it made it really easy. It did. I didn't really think about alcohol, but every night before I went to bed, or every evening, I took that Xanax,
Hmm.
half of it, and then maybe a whole one every night. Yeah. So I hung on to that. Um, it actually did curb me for a while, but then it turned against me eventually. It turned against me.
Describe that. How did it turn against you?
Well, um, I after I left Florida, I was there for a year, and I got a job in California. So I moved to Northern California, and I lived in Santa Cruz, and I have my Santa Cruz colors on here. Um, yeah, and in Santa Cruz, here I am moving to a hippie town, party town, beach surfer town. Probably not the best place for me to be. And when I moved to California, I was blown away at just how available alcohol was, like everywhere. I was just not used to that. You could get it anywhere, anytime too. Like back in Pennsylvania, we had if you drank liquor, you had to go to a state store, and the state stores were closed on Sunday. you know, so this was like, oh man, alcohol was all around me. So I hung in there in California for a little while, but then I had an issue with my neck, and eventually I had to give up the sport of racquetball. So here I am in California. I have no sport. I started drinking more, um, and um, and then it started to kind of increase. But then I found the sport of volleyball there. So then I found another sport outlet. But I continued to drink. But it wasn't until I turned 50. That's where, and I was in California still. That's where it really sort of just turned into, it escalated. My alcohol use disorder escalated like crazy. When I turned 50, I got laid off from a company that I worked for like 21 years. I lost my girlfriend, and I was not happy about turning 50 at all. I was really depressed about it. And that's kind of when it started. So I started getting into this binging pattern. And that's what I fought for the next like 10 years. I had a binging pattern. It was really bad. I would I kind of lived like a dual lifestyle. Like I was like super healthy, played volleyball, went to the gym. I took vitamins. I took supplements. I took a lot of the supplements that you recommend. Super healthy. But then whatever it was, some little thing would happen. Maybe I was depressed about something at work, or maybe something else went wrong. Or maybe I just finished playing volleyball and I'm sore and tired. I just wanted something. I would pick up a drink, and it was like, bam, I would go into this binge, and my binges would last for like 2 weeks solid. It would start kind of slow, but then it would quickly, over a couple of days, just escalate to a point where I was drinking around the clock. What I was doing, basically, I was drinking, and at that time I was drinking like hard cider. I would drink cider for like 4 hours, eat something, fall asleep, and then I would sleep for about a couple of hours, till the alcohol wore off, woke up, started drinking, and this would continue into the night and into the middle of the night, like around the clock. And, the binges got so bad where eventually, when I fell into a binge, I just like everything I was doing before, taking vitamins, supplements, all that stuff out the window, stopped. I started eating garbage. I craved like garbage food. I was going to McDonald's, and getting like four, sausage, egg, and cheese McMuffins and eating them and stuff. And, it was bad. I didn't take care of myself. I didn't shower. I didn't shave. I like barely brushed my teeth. It was horrible. Like what I was doing to myself. But then at the end of 2 weeks, I was always able to just, what happened was I literally drank like till I couldn't drink anymore. And I knew it was like, okay, 2 weeks has gone by. I gotta get it together. And so I just kind of just stopped, I just stopped. And it was a little hard at first, but not super hard. But as the years went on in this binging pattern, and I would binge, I had sort of like a cycle every couple of months. As the binging went on, the binges got worse, and it got harder to get out of the binge as the years went by. And so, during that span of 10 years, towards the end, like the binges were getting really hard to get out, like scary hard.
How did you deal, if I can ask, with your obligations or relationships in the middle? If you're in the middle of a 2-week binge, drinking around the clock, I mean, that sounds like a recipe for a disaster.
I didn't have it. I didn't have any of those things.
So would you say you were isolated?
Oh yeah, that's what I would do. because
Okay.
usually, I picked up a drink because of something when I had some kind of problem. But the thing is, once I picked up that drink, man, I was like addicted, like it instantly, and then that just set me off. But but yeah, so what I did basically was I just stayed home. I didn't do anything. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't answer text messages. I didn't look at emails. I ignored my work. I couldn't keep a girlfriend. No way. I just couldn't. I met girls, but they quickly left me. Um, it was just total in the hole, man.
I
Really
can
bad.
relate to that. When I lived in New York, I was kind of holed up in my apartment in Manhattan, and I had some friends from college there. Some pretty impressive people. I had a buddy who was working on his PhD in Columbia, and he somehow managed to uh, seemingly drink as much as I did when we were together. What I probably didn't see was him taking cold showers and working out while I was back still drinking by myself. Uh,
Uh,
and so I would end up taking too many sick days if I was in kind of a binge week. Then maybe I'd have a good week where I only had a bottle of wine a night. And so I was like, no, I'm a normal New Yorker. We all drink wine. We're in New York, whatever. I've got the skyline. I have to have a glass of wine in my hand when I'm looking at the skyline, all these excuses. And yeah, I got to a very dark place where, like, thank God I didn't have a car. I walked to work, but I was either drunk or hungover or in withdrawal all of the time, usually in withdrawal when I was at work, but I could not wait to get home, which I'm sure affected my job performance. I mean, that in finance in Manhattan is not a job where you get to go home at 5 p.m. So like I'd maybe push it to 6 and my hands would be shaking too hard. It's like, I gotta go. And then it's like the guilt and the shame, like knowing that there's probably people who are wondering where I am. I didn't want to think about that. So I drink more and then I wouldn't worry about it. It's very odd, reactive, isolated, insular pattern that I had going on there. And yeah, just a total vicious cycle. But I can relate. What I didn't understand, but this is kind of amazing to me, and I'm sure, or I would guess that you didn't either at the time, is that it seemed like I was always looking for a break where I would just have that perfect night's sleep and wake up the next day and it would all be over. What I didn't understand was that the bright, beautiful, sober tomorrow was not going to come as long as I kept destroying my REM sleep with alcohol. I was going to inevitably biochemically wake up feeling like hell. I had to break that cycle. But in order to break the cycle, I had to do it intelligently. And I had to rebuild myself from the ground up with nutrients, get back into exercise slowly. At that time, deferred gratification and deferred reward for goals was not something in my lexicon. It was all like now, now, now. I would spend 3 days doing hungover workouts or workouts in withdrawal. If I didn't perceive a benefit, I'd say, oh, this sucks. I'm going to go back to drinking. So I didn't understand the process that it would take to actually get to the point that I wanted to be, that I knew I could get to. And fundamentally, that's because I didn't understand how alcohol worked and how many days it took to get out of my system. And not just to people talk vaguely about toxins leaving your system. It's so much more than that. You have to rebuild your neurotransmitter levels so that you feel like a human being. I could go on, and I've gone on about this. People who are watching have probably seen my other videos on that. But I'm guessing that there was no, that maybe similar to me, despite the fact that you had periods where you were healthy. And I think it shows because you don't look your age at all. You look very good, despite the damage that you did. And I did a lot of damage to myself as well. Maybe that's why I don't have hair. I don't know. But, despite that, it seems that we didn't totally understand what we were dealing with on a biochemical level. And that could have at least helped at least explode the illusion that we could kind of snap out of it magically.
Absolutely. And that was very confusing for me because I was confused because, I had all these healthy periods. So, I knew there was something wrong. Right. But I spent so many years trying to just have that one or two, and it was confusing because sometimes I would, But then the next day, I might have 3. And then the next day, I might have 4. And then boom, binge. So it took me years and years over and over and over to figure out, okay, this is not, there's no way, it took me a long time to really accept that I had alcohol use disorder and be okay with it. I fought it. I just felt like, why does this have to happen every time? Why does this have to happen? Why can't I just drink like a normal person? Because, like I said, some days I would have 2. And I would mark it on the calendar. Okay, 2.
I do think tolerance is probably genetically determined. In that, I don't think anyone's behavior is genetically determined, because I'm not a determinist. And I've had other episodes where I've gone in depth about my, I think, nuanced views on alcoholism as a phenomenon. There's certainly a lot to talk about, which is why we have a podcast, on this. I think it's extremely nuanced. There's more of an element of choice than people realize. However, I would say 2 major points. The first is that tolerance does seem to be genetic. The first time I ever drank, now I probably had glasses of wine with my parents or whatever as a 14-year-old on Thanksgiving or whatever. But the first time I really drank, I had an entire bottle of 99 bananas. And my 2 friends who were with me had like 2 sips and they were passed out. They were hammered. And I finished the bottle and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you guys? Like, this party just started. And I'm going to go down my parents' liquor cabinet, see if they have some port or cooking sherry, like we're just getting started here. But so I do think the tolerance and perhaps like some dopamine sensitivities could be inherited, which people should watch out for. I think the second thing is that once we understand the nature of the thing, the nature of the substance and the nature of the brain and our own brains individually, we can then see that we have way more choice over what it is that we do. And for a lot of people out there, even if they can have periods or even entire lifetimes where they can have 1 or 2 and stop at that because they can use their choice to stop, maybe it's not fulfilling. Maybe it's a losing game because 2 doesn't feel that good. And, you want 8, especially if you've had 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5, and you're feeling the same effect with 5 that you did several days later as you did with 2 before. That's a problem. And it's not a problem in the sense that it's something that's inevitably going to kill you or make you miserable, but maybe it's a problem to the extent that it should make you reevaluate whether this thing is worthwhile for you. Maybe it's too annoying. Maybe it just sucks, and hence the drinking sucks. Most people don't get more out of alcohol than alcohol gets out of them, to paraphrase Winston Churchill, when they start wondering about these types of things. And so that was certainly the case for me. I'm not afraid of being held at gunpoint. If someone came in here with a gun and made me chug a 40 of beer, there's no chance, I can tell you, that I would run to the liquor store and get more, because I have enough power over my life to say, and actually having been served accidentally, I can say it's not that pleasant once you're really balanced. There's these other things. I'm not insulated. I'm not isolated. I've got so many other things. My first thought would be, how do I get this out of my system so I can do a 3-hour MMA workout tomorrow? It's like reprioritized. But for people who are out of balance biochemically or socially or spiritually, or who don't have those other things to strive for, and they haven't conditioned their dopamine circuits to want those things more, it's a serious issue.
Yeah. And I'm of Irish heritage. So, I totally makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I had a traumatic event when I was young. When I was about 14, but I don't really think that was the root of my drinking, because bottom line is I pick up that stuff. It's just like an instant thing. It's a physical addiction for me, for sure. Mm-hmm. I had a period where in California where that kombucha brand called GTS?
Yeah.
And they came out with, I used to drink kombucha, and then they came out with this black bottle, and it had like a little bit more alcohol in it. It wasn't like
1.5% or something. I think they got in trouble because someone tested it, and I think some of them ended up being more.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I actually called them. I called the company to find out, hey, how much is in this black bottle? And they gave me that it's less than 0.5, which is what the regular bottle is, right? Is it
I
less
think
than
point 0.5 is the limit for non-alcoholic beer and kombucha.
told
Yeah,
me that.
right.
And I'm like, I've thought thinking to myself, no, it's not. It's more than that. So anyway, so I started drinking the kombucha, right? And I could have like one of those at night, and it's like, oh, that feels good. Kind of relaxes me. Um, and then I started to have two a night, and then I would have three a night. Then I started buying by the case, but I
When was
didn't get
this?
drunk.
Was this in the 50 to 60 period?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was like my attempt at an alternative at that time.
Okay. Yeah.
And I would buy it by the case, but I didn't get drunk off it. Like even if I drank six, I didn't get drunk. But it was just the thing. I just was drinking more and more and more. Buying by the case.
There's a
So
lot of sugar in there too. I mean, it's not that much per, maybe there's 5 or 10 grams in them, but yeah,
yeah,
if you have 5 or 10 of them, that's a little sugar boost as well.
yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I have Irish heritage and definitely has play in it. I mean, my grandfather had alcohol use disorder, and my dad had periods where he struggled with it at times. He pretty much kept it together, but he definitely always had Seagram 7 in the house for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely a lot said for the lineage. And I think you're of Scandinavian, is that right?
So I have more Irish than I do Scandinavian. I have a little bit of that in me.
Okay.
I have a mishmash of things, Irish, Scottish, some Central European. They can't really tell, I guess, the difference between French and German for some reason. So whatever that is. But yeah, and then a little Russian, Scandinavian, and Native American, which is not a good makeup for an alcohol drinker generally. Probably some of the worst of the worst. But yeah, and little
Well,
did
I
I
came
know,
up.
I thought I was Italian. I grew up in New Jersey,
Huh.
and the drinking age was not 18 when I was 18. Otherwise, I'm sure I would have taken advantage. One of my earliest stories about that, though, is I was with a friend of mine. We were both on the swim team in high school, and it was a Friday night, and we this was very odd in retrospect. He and I went driving to uh, just the local strip mall to see if there was any way we could obtain some alcohol. We had no plan. We weren't gonna, walk up to a person and ask them to buy us. We thought maybe we can somehow find alcohol. And sure enough, someone for some reason had left I think it was a 24 pack of beer in the parking lot. And we got it and we took it home. And I think he had a couple of them and I drank the rest of them. And yeah, that was a very weird thing. That was before I turned 18 because I must have had some permit or something. I wasn't heavily drinking at the time yet, at least not regularly. But it didn't make me think twice. But I knew the next morning I felt odd. And I thought alcohol is a really weird thing. Like I see why people do it. And I remember thinking, I don't see how people get through the morning after it. And I was like, oh, well, I'd probably do it again. That was the extent of my analysis at the time. I
Yeah.
was like, it seems like the pros outweigh the cons because that was a lot of fun. But I think the fun was that it was just the coincidence and the novelty, and he and I having a great story. There was no need for me to go home and just clobber my brain with that stuff and not get good sleep. So it was kind of a harbinger of things to come. But I never had any deep insight into any of this, really, and amazingly, because I always thought of myself as inquisitive and school with topics that I liked, and yet I never started analyzing myself in any meaningful way with my relationship with alcohol until after I quit.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. Yeah, and to go back to the lineage thing and the Irish thing, I did years ago come up because I always was trying to stop drinking, right? And I used to attend AA meetings and stuff. But I came up with a good little line for myself when when you're at a party and you have that issue where somebody says, "Well, why aren't you drinking?" Right? This is like very common among people like you and I, right? So what I say is, I'm Irish, so I don't drink.
That's a
And it's
good
a
one.
good one
Yeah.
because not everyone gets it at first, right? It's
Hmm.
kind of like a joke, but
Hmm.
it's not. it's really serious. I'm Irish, so I don't drink.
Yeah. And
Because
so
if
I
I
like it. So
do,
more humorous way of what I used to tell people, and now no one asks. And I don't know if it's because I'm usually hanging out with people I know. I don't remember the last time I was asked. And I think part of it is that people ask questions, that kind of question, at least, if they sense something is off or if they sense that you're vulnerable in some way. I found that's my theory, because I was a shaky non-drinker for the first year off alcohol, and that I would be probably a little awkward because I was thinking about alcohol. And I'm like, no, let's refocus on the people. It takes time to develop those neural pathways to where it's just natural. And you act as if you were a person who either doesn't even know that there's alcohol and that people are drinking because you feel better than they do by default. Um, or you have such a good time that you're out dancing and you're acting as if you did drink, but you just don't need the alcohol. You have the natural endorphin rush and everything that they're doing artificially, naturally. But yeah, for a while, people would ask, and I always said, I don't drink because I used to drink too much, so I quit, and that was it.
yeah,
The more yeah, yours is a more humorous version of that. But yeah, I think
I
it gets
still
to
get
the
asked.
same point.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
still get asked. Yeah,
Yeah. And I never felt an obligation to share with anyone, but typically, no one would, they wouldn't mess with me after that. And be like, oh, well, I think you should drink anyway. That's a weird thing to say to someone who just told you. It was like just enough divulging of my past that they respected me for being transparent, but not enough to tell them all the embarrassing things about my past. So it seemed to me to be acceptable. And then, yeah, I mean, now I've got my lemon juice and Pellegrino or whatever, and it's not a big deal at all. Just no one cares,
yeah,
especially when they're strangers. I feel like no one cares. And it could be there was like a spate of weddings right after I quit drinking, which I think was the universe testing me at the time. And I've had fewer weddings recently. So maybe that's it. Maybe there'll be a wedding next year and someone will ask, but it's really the last thing on my mind. And I just kind of chuckle it off. I have a way more nonchalant, nothing can hurt me kind of mentality. Whereas back then I felt, I think, a little more vulnerable about it.
yeah. Well, and like these days, I don't even care anymore. I'll tell people the
Yeah.
whole story if they want to
Yeah,
hear it.
exactly.
Yeah, because of where I'm at now, I'm past all that. So I really kept my drinking super like secret to everyone. There were only like all of those years I talked about. There was only a couple people that knew, like my sister, my son, and my other members of my family, of course. But like I didn't tell anyone. Super secret about it.
Well, you have a really impressive before picture. I don't know if you
Yeah,
wanted to bring that up now or later, but we
yeah,
will
yeah.
put that up on the screen for anyone watching on YouTube. And for anyone listening, we have a YouTube version of this at the Fit Recovery YouTube channel. And so, yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about that before picture?
So this is a picture of me, kind of what I look like. This is at the end of one of my, binges. I don't know how many weeks, couple of weeks, not taking care of myself at all. That's how I looked. That's
What compelled you to take that picture?
Well, because I was struggling. I couldn't figure out how to stop, this cycle. I spent so many years just trying to get out of that cycle. And I was so frustrated. I used to mark on the calendar, like what days I went into a binge. I have a bunch of calendars for, I don't know, maybe like 5 years where I have it all like checked off what days I drank the entire year. So I struggled with it. I was really struggling. I just wanted it to stop. I wanted to stop it. It was so hard to get out of that pattern.
Yeah.
But I knew in my heart that there was something physiological about it. Just the way I would go in and out of like super healthy, because after I looked like that picture, I managed to just stop drinking. Wasn't easy, but I did it. It was the first day or two. It was horrible. But I'll say the first week. But um, forget what I was going with that, but
Yeah, well, let me bring it back a second. And also, we got I think my dog Magnus feels your pain because he was groaning behind me when you were describing
oh,
how
sorry,
bad you
man.
felt. Yeah. So you had these 2-week benders typically, and then
Yeah.
would you get off completely, or was there a period of drinking just a little less than usual? Okay,
I would just hardcore stop it, and
just stop.
it
Now,
was
did you
stop.
find that withdrawal got worse? So each time there's something called kindling, right? And so each time you go through a withdrawal, it tends to be worse than the time before.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, and that developed over the years,
Hmm.
where how I would recover very quickly and get myself back into shape and looking good really quickly, and then it took me a little longer each time. And then each time I had a binge, it was harder to get out. And
Right.
just before I was finally able to stop, I mean, I was doing crazy things just trying to get out of the binge. I was calling like, rehabs and stuff and just crazy stuff. Like, sending crazy messages to my family, help me, just, oh man, it was scary, scary stuff. Just trying to
So,
get out of that binge. But I hardlined it every time. I just did it on my own with nothing.
how much time would you typically have between the 2-week binges?
Um, Usually a couple of months,
Okay.
like 3 months.
Okay.
But then they started getting closer to each other.
Right.
So I would look at those calendars and I could see glaring. I knew anyway, but yeah, they started to get closer to each other, and then they started to last longer too.
So,
So the last binge that I had, it was right when I was here in Hawaii and the pandemic hit, and we were locked down, and I was on a contract job. The job was over. I had to move out of my place, and oh man, I was in a bad place. So I started drinking, and I just like didn't care. I just didn't care. I was buying champagne bottles. I was drinking champagne, and
I've
it
done it.
it, it
Yeah.
lasted a month. That one lasted a month. Yeah, and I had to go to a detox to get out. And I went to one detox. My son helped me get to a detox, and it was a national hospital chain, and I won't mention the hospital name. So guess what they did? They put me in a bed, right? And then I was like sort of in the hallway, and there was like nurses there that could see me. And so I was laying back in the bed. They didn't give me anything, nothing, nothing. And every time I would like get up from the bed, they would go lay back down.
That's very odd.
Dude, I didn't last in there. I don't know how many hours I lasted in there, but it wasn't long. I called my son and said, "Hey, come get me."
I've heard of similar stories. I won't mention either, but yeah, that's appalling and it's dangerous too.
Horrible.
Um, yeah.
It's horrible.
So was it after one of these binges you just decided, all right, that's it. This is it, or did you know that you were gonna get onto a much better path? How did that
No,
kind of transpire?
no, I didn't know. When I was on that binge of a lifetime that I told you about here in Hawaii, I went to that detox and I got right out of that. And then my sister helped find a place for me here. And it was a really good place. They gave me a medically assisted detox. The doctor there, it was a nice facility. I stayed in there overnight. They pumped me with a ton of gabapentin and a whole bunch of other stuff. And man, when I woke up, Jesus, it took me like an entire day to just feel like normal again. But I got out of there, and I only spent one night in there. I had to leave. I couldn't stand being in there either. But they helped me out, and I got introduced to gabapentin through there. So I left there, got home. Guess what I did? I started drinking again. My son he literally dropped me off from that detox, and he left. And I had like a bottle of champagne somewhere. I started drinking again. He came back. He caught
Hmm.
me. And he was so pissed, but
I
uh,
bet. I
yeah.
recall when I was in the detox for a while myself, they would they would actually sit us down whenever someone would leave the rehab. We had people that were there for like 6 months, and they're drying out. And then some of them would just drive to the liquor store immediately, like from rehab. 6 months there. I'm laughing. It's not funny, but it's ridiculous. And I couldn't understand it. And I always remember wondering, like, what's the thought process there, if anything? And now I have more insight into it, but I'm wondering if you could tell us what was going on in your head when you had just gone through this kind of ridiculous, but effective, I suppose, gabapentin detox. Seemed like something maybe you wouldn't want to repeat again. It probably wasn't cheap. But then you go drink champagne. Like, what was happening in your head? Do you remember?
I don't know. I think just because it was there,
Okay.
maybe if it wasn't in my house, it wouldn't have happened. But yeah, I don't know. Was not happy with myself. So, you know, a couple of years before that, I saw that TED talk with Claudia Christian about naltrexone and the Sinclair method. When I first watched that video, I was like, I'm not doing that. I don't want a pill to keep me drinking. I want to stop drinking, right? Sorry. Um, so I didn't go that route. But then later on, after this crazy binge and I was home, I had the gabapentin. That's when I went to my doctor. And my doctor goes, naltrexone. He goes, I've never heard of that. So he pulled it up on his screen. He read a little bit. I was like, okay, we can try that.
At least he was open-minded. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. No, thankfully. So he prescribed me that. And so that's how I got out of my that binge. I had gabapentin, naltrexone. Took me about 3 or 4 days to a week. It just slowly just taper down. Every couple hours I would take that naltrexone and the gabapentin along with drinking.
During your binges, right? So it was still targeted, and that you weren't taking naltrexone when you didn't have alcohol in your system, I assume.
No, I actually used that along with the gabapentin to sort of wean myself down to a point where I could actually just kind of put it down, altogether. Um, so, so then, I kept up with that for probably a year. And I know I've heard you mention the story about naltrexone because I think you were prescribed it once, and the doctor when they prescribe it to you, they don't prescribe it the right way because it says take one a day, right? But
Yeah.
the Sinclair method calls for you to take it in an hour before you have a drink. So I was doing that. I don't know how long I did that. Maybe, I don't know, 6 months or maybe close to a year. I don't remember. But, and so I was drinking, but I was drinking very, smaller amounts. I didn't go into any binges. Um, but, and that kept me kind of somewhat sort of pretty stable for the most part, but still drinking. Um, and then that's when I found your podcast or your video. And your video is titled "How I Rebalanced My Brain." How I quit drinking by rebalancing my brain chemistry. And that title, struck me. And then when I watched that video, it's like,
That's good. So that was a turning point for you. And that video is also on YouTube for anyone who wants to check it out.
yep.
But that's interesting. So it's kind of like there were certain steps on your path here. The Sinclair method seems to have helped. The gabapentin seems to have helped. And then you found the nutrient repair and fit recovery.
Yeah, I found your video and I saw fit recovery. And I was like, that's it. I watched that video. I'm like, this is what I've been looking for a long time. It's exactly what I was looking for. Fit recovery. This is me. And so found that podcast. And then I found your Fit Recovery YouTube channel and I just started watching those. And it was amazing. After I watched that first video, eventually, fairly quickly, I went out and got some DLPA, D-L-phenylalanine, some glutamine, and some tyrosine. And I started taking it in the morning. And Chris, it was like a light switch was flipped off. And that was almost a year ago. And from that first day that I started doing that, I have not had a thought or a craving or anything. It's like those that targeted for me, that targeted group of those amino acids was like a miracle.
That's amazing. Those also, among other things, helped me tremendously. Can you describe what it felt like, the difference once you took those?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, I felt good, right? Definitely, I know with DLPA that it definitely um, gives me a good sense of well-being. It makes me clear-headed, almost like a cup of coffee, but not stimulate like a cup of coffee. A very different kind of a clarity, energy, and it really helps me with depression too. Really helps me with depression.
Was
So
depression
yeah.
something you struggled with, was it a lifelong thing, or just as the binges got worse, maybe you depleted some brain chemicals?
Oh, I definitely did deplete for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was one of the first things I learned from you when I watched that video, because you mentioned about how post-acute withdrawal symptoms can last up to a year. And I was like, whoa, that blew my mind. And it made total sense. This is why I could never stop, because I would go into a binge and then I would only go 3 months. So I never really achieved that full on, repair.
Mm-hmm.
I was doing short little bits and then boom, back. Yeah.
And the good news is you might have achieved, if not full repair, at least closer to it, if you had had the nutrient repair when you
Yeah.
started binging years and
Yeah.
years ago. You could have gotten closer. It might have preempted you from either having a worse binge or going into one in the first place.
It totally would have. It absolutely would have. Now, mind you, I'm 61. I've had a long history just battling this thing. Just it was a battle. So uh, I have to, just mention also that I was really ready to stop. I've been through so many things with it. I was at a point, and now I'm turned 60, and I made a promise to myself years ago that I'm going to stop drinking by the time I was 55, because I know once you turn 55, your system just, starts to degrade, and you don't want to put alcohol in there, right? You do not. But I failed on that promise, but 60, I was able to turn around. So I had these factors, and I live in Hawaii, so you know, so I had a long history, and so what I'm saying is I was really ready. I think that if you took the average guy off the street, let's say you get a homeless guy off the street and you give him those three targeted amino acids, it might work. But I also do think that, you have to be ready as well.
Yeah,
You think?
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's why I like to put the nutrient repair in the context of the biochemical, psychological, social, spiritual. I haven't found a better model for that, because I think that's actually all encompassing for people, whether or not they have a substance issue. For like my dad has told me all the time, he said, I know fit recovery is recovery, but it's like, I feel like it's kind of helped me categorize the parts of my life and like make sure I have balance. But yeah, I think that's also to say that the mindset piece is super important. The spiritual piece, the social piece, all of these things fit together. None of those things are in isolation. They're all interwoven as well. And I do think the desire to live a certain kind of life, the desire to have a certain kind of routine day in and day out, the strategy, just even cold calculating strategy, and how am I going to arrange my day and my week and my month and this next year. People don't have to be as maybe borderline OCD as I am about this, but if you're really committed to those things, then it's going to be hard for any force, whether it's a genetic predisposition or someone physically trying to stop you from acting out that vision for yourself. So you have to have that vision and that mindset, the mentality, because otherwise you can slip into a sort of nihilism. And, you hear people say all the time, why'd I drink? Why'd you drink again? Oh, I drank because I felt great, and figure, why not? that's a lack of foresight. It's not, I've certainly done that, but what that indicates is a lack of a vision. Because like, oh, well, that means you didn't care about the quality of your sleep tonight, which means you didn't care about how you're going to feel tomorrow, which means you don't care about your productivity tomorrow. And then the cascading effect that has. And you didn't think about the fact that if you feel really crummy tomorrow, you're more likely to do something to cover up feeling crummy. That's how the vicious cycle gets going. It's not that mystifying as to why alcohol tends to become this snowballing, cascading train wreck for people who have this predisposition and an ability to rack up an immense amount of tolerance quickly and then feel awful and then deplete their brain chemicals. So I do think the mental aspect is important. You were ready, but I think also there are probably people listening right now who are in their 20s, even 20s, 30s, maybe teenagers. So I've had some surprisingly young people reach out to me, and I don't think it's impossible for them to have that light bulb moment, that epiphany. It's perspective is everything, which is a cliche. But if you have the right perspective, especially at a young age, which is possible, I didn't have in my 20s, but there are people who do seem to have that like light bulb epiphany, perspective moving moment where that falls into place. And then if they get their biochemistry in order and they have things that they love doing, they can live an awesome life. And this is not something that hangs over it like a dark cloud.
Right. And that's and one of the great things about your program is, I mentioned the targeted 3 amino acids that I talked about. Again, phenylalanine, glutamine, tyrosine. But that's, there's so much more that you've introduced me to that it's helped me so much, just like, because, when you're recovering, or let's say when you're transforming and regenerating all of those neurotransmitters and so forth, there's a lot of other things that help me with my everyday life. Like, you turn me on to CBD oil, CBD pure. You got me started drinking chamomile tea. And like this one thing, chamomile tea, I've experimented with that years ago. Years ago, I tried all that kind of stuff that helps you sleep, like all the herbs and everything. And I tried chamomile tea. It never really worked for me. I never really liked the taste of it either. But when I heard you say that you used to take 8 tea bags and put them in, I was like, oh, okay. So I went out, and I'm going to show you. This is the brand that I found. I found this by Googling best chamomile tea. And this is a brand called FGO. I know you guys like to share brands and stuff.
Yeah.
Organic chamomile. This is from Egypt and doesn't have anything else in it. There's no other flowers or honey or herbs or anything. So it's straight chamomile. Oh my God, the taste of this stuff is so good. I don't use 8 bags, but I use 3.
That's probably good.
Yeah. Yeah. And then what I do is I take the CBD oil and I put it in there and I mix it around. It doesn't really mix that good, but it's okay. And it kind of throws off the taste sometimes. So sometimes I'll just drink straight chamomile, but a lot of times I'll just put CBD oil in my chamomile tea. What a hell of a nightcap that is. It's a great thing. Mm-hmm. And chamomile has so many health benefits for you. Doesn't just help you with sleep. It helps you with digestion, helps you with depression. There's a whole list of health benefits that chamomile tea can give you, which you can probably list better.
Yeah, natural antidepressant, natural anti-anxiety agent, natural gabapentin in some ways, non-addictive, of course. The CBD added to that just turbocharges it. Inflammation reduction, amazing anxiety reduction, craving reduction. I have chamomile tea every night. I went to Austin for a few nights last week for some business actually. And I brought a tea bag of chamomile tea for every night that I'm there. I'm at the point now where I think because I have a more fine-tuned biochemistry that I don't need the massive amounts. I needed a lot to feel anything of anything back, maybe because my gut was imbalanced. It probably had some alcohol is very bad for the gut. So it's not uncommon to have trouble absorbing things for a while. But now it's like, I have a molecule of something. It's like, I sense it. So I can do one tea bag now, like a normal person. But then again, if I had jet lag or something, I'd be putting 8 tea bags back in if I needed to go to sleep or whatever. I have all these strategies that I used to use for the post-cure withdrawal for the rest of my life in case I need them for anything else.
Yeah, and I've learned so many things from you. Like, there's just so many things. Like, that's the great thing about your program because it's not just about stopping drinking, which I did, right? But it's like discovering, like this, like it's like discovering all these new things. Like, there's so many things that I've learned from your podcast that I haven't even tried yet.
It's awesome
And
to
I,
hear.
yeah, there's so many things that you guys have introduced me to. It's amazing. So it's not like I'm stopping something, which I did. It's like I'm starting something new. And it's just fabulous. It's fabulous life. Fabulous.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, it's like you're exiting this kind of confined alcohol-based universe, which I used to be in, and alcohol is a very confining substance, socially, spiritually, biochemically, you're confined to the alcohol, to this just vast universe of all of these things. And yeah, I think having an open-ended approach to what it is that you want to explore is huge. And you mentioned that at one point racquetball was something that really helped you. And for me, it's been MMA. And I had a period of just doing heavy deadlifts all the time. And now I'm like trying to learn to kite surf whenever it's warm. It's a little cold right now. That's another thing. It's like, how the hell did I spend 10 years like not even knowing what kite surfing was? I didn't know what jujitsu was. And now I'd spent a fair amount of time doing that. It's like, it's not regret about time I wasted. It's just amazement now about because I think all phases of life serve a purpose. But now it's like a gratitude that I'm able to immerse myself in all these things and that I'm in control of my life. I get to choose what I'm going to do. And that's, I think, the best way for people starting out who might wonder, how am I going to get through this life without alcohol? It's like, just trust me, that's a myopic way to conceive of the whole thing. So don't even think about not drinking. You don't even have to swear off drinking. Immerse yourself in other things. It'll get crowded out pretty quickly. And if you get served accidentally in the future, which I've been, even if you decide to moderate, I've had a bunch of people, we are so open-ended that we're not abstinence only people. I've helped people who want to cut down. It's up to them. If someone doesn't want to quit, they don't have to quit. They can figure out for themselves whether or not that's too much of a pain in the butt to deal with. But a lot of people then find, oh, I naturally just drink way less because it's just a kind of a bad trade-off. And I want to do all these things, for them, maybe it's not jujitsu and kite surfing and, whatever other random things I have on my agenda, but maybe it's other things I've never even heard of. I had a really, an awesome client a few years ago who had, put off her lifetime passion of painting so that she could drink for decades. And then she sent me a picture a few months after we stopped coaching. And it was her basement filled with these beautiful landscape paintings.
Wow.
And she had just gotten back into it. And she's like, this is what I do every night. I go home. It's like, it's my comfy routine. I have my dinner. I do my stuff. And then I go down and I paint. And she actually had to go down and dust everything off. And yeah, really cool stuff.
Wow. Yeah. And that's the other great part about your program is, I have like just about a year now of not having a drink, but I'm still like I feel like I'm still in my infancy. I can still feel so many more things I can achieve, like physically for the most part, health wise and mental health, all those things. And, your program is not just about stopping drinking because you talk about other things that are just general health, like everything. So many things I've learned from you just about general well-being and health. It's not just about, take this herb or that herb. It's about, what you're putting in your body, what you're eating, and, meditation, all these kinds of things. It's just, yeah, it's amazing. It's an amazing program you have. There's
Love to hear
nobody
it.
doing
Yeah.
what you're doing. There's no one doing what
Which
you're
is
doing.
surreal to me. I mean, there are a lot of great programs out there.
No,
But yeah, I think it's pretty unique. We have a special group of people. Yeah, I'm curious about what is your like day to day like? What do you fill your time with now that you have all this energy? You look vibrant. I take it you spend some time in the sun in Hawaii, but what's a week like for you at this point?
yeah, pretty much. I work. I'm blessed that I get to work from home in Hawaii, and then when I'm not working, I'm a big beach volleyball
Nice.
player, and I've been doing that for a bunch of years. So still doing that here in Hawaii, and I'm a surfer too. So
That's great.
yeah, go to the gym, cycle a little bit, So yeah, a lot of outdoor stuff. I like to hike. There's so many good hikes here. Um, so
I
yeah,
really think that like the outdoors just generally is medicine.
yeah,
And I, there's the whole thing about relocating, not solving the problem. And I'm like, yes, but I have to say, now that I live in Savannah, which is not quite as temperate as Hawaii, but when I'm here, I feel like my blood pressure is so much lower just regularly than when I lived in the middle of a bunch of buildings in Manhattan. I'm not anti-city. I like to go back to Manhattan and visit for a few days, but when I come back here, it's like, like we're back. No one's like, there's not cameras everywhere, and I'm not stressed out. It's not people getting, drunkenly. Well, there are downtown. I guess Savannah actually is a big drinking city. I'm kind of on the outskirts of it, right near the water. So I just see nature. And I've seen studies showing that people, and I've mentioned these before in previous episodes, but people around more green things, trees and whatnot, tend to be mentally healthier. I don't think it's a
absolutely.
coincidence. We evolved to be outdoors for more than 10 minutes in your walk to work.
Absolutely, and amazing benefits that the sun provides you. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, the sun does amazing things for you. Provides you with lots of healthy things, vitamin D, but it also is a big on for depression too. Because I know, like when I lived in the East Coast, Pennsylvania, like it was gloomy all the time. It was not, it's very different, right? When you have that sun.
Yeah. Well, vitamin D levels and serotonin levels are correlated. So I think
Absolutely.
vitamin D is involved in that. Yeah, and I mean it does so many things. Just the
Yeah.
sun on your skin, releasing endorphins. It's why, like the best buzz that I can get now is like the combination of a workout buzz. Like, and I've always said, my dad's actually always said this since I was a kid. I remember him saying that there's no high that he's ever had that's actually been better than a good workout. I remember thinking about that back when I drank, and I think it was just like my baseline sense of well-being was so low that I couldn't actually get an effective workout, so it didn't feel good.
Hmm.
So then alcohol felt better because that was my habitual high at the time. But now that I'm a fine-tuned machine, it's like he's absolutely right. There's nothing better than a workout unless it's a workout in the sun. And then you get the endorphins from the workout and the endorphins and the vitamin D and everything from the sun as well.
Yeah. And when you say fine tune machine, that makes me want to say too. That's the other great thing about your program is like, I watch all your podcasts, right? I watch every day. I watch like one, and it's like part of my day every day. And so I see you, I see Matt Finch, your co-host, and you guys you're a fine-tuned machine. You've gone so far with it, and so that's really inspiring for me because I want to get to the same place you guys are. I'm
Well, I,
great.
I have to say, I learned from Matt Finch all the time. He's probably got like 3,000 smoothie recipes in his smoothie cookbook that he hasn't published yet, but he needs to. I mean, yeah, that guy is before when I came across Matt Finch's blog years ago, and he was only blogging about his past was mainly opiates, but also alcohol, really everything. And I remember thinking like, I want to get on this guy's level. And then it turned out we had things to teach each other. And then this became a project just totally serendipitously, but really, really glad to hear that it's a part of your routine. And
Yeah.
I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I
Wow.
say that not with a sense of being mad that I'm not there. It's more like this is a evolving adventure for everyone. I'm far from perfect right now. In the last I'm 3 days into resetting my carb levels. And I had some intestinal discomfort last night because my body was like, screw you. Why didn't you have any rice with your Indian meal? It's like, well, I'm not going full keto, but I'm cutting carbs after the holiday phase. So I find I always have phases. I'm not like training for a bodybuilding competition. At some point, we might do some things, more things on social media, which will probably give me an incentive to get back into my after picture fitness level where I think I was probably, I don't know, 10% maybe 12% body fat. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I say fine-tuned machine. There are people who are way finer tuned than I am for sure. But the important thing for me is everything I do is really for my own mental health at this point, and anything else is a byproduct. And if I feel good, then that's good. And not in the sense that, well, if I ate 12 donuts right now, I'd probably feel good. But that would be the same kind of artificial stimulation and feeling good as the alcohol was. But as I said, I'll have some chocolate cake over Christmas if my mom made it or if one of her friends made it. But then there's this natural balancing that goes on now where it's like I'm aware of my sleep. I'm aware of the importance of my mind state when I start my day, the importance of my state of mind when I end the day, and then everything in between. It's a coherent whole rather than a fragmented series of random convoluted actions, which is what it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, that's the best thing about this is we're not just stopping drinking. We have so much to just explore. It's like it's not like stopping something. It's like starting a new life.
Yeah,
and it's a great life.
I'll say also, I think that this is a great time to do that because, I say that I don't love cities all the time. I had an amazing time in Austin last week, and every nice restaurant I went to had these non-alcoholic cocktails, and there's like a never-ending new supply of spirits that are not spirits, and then ways of mixing them up. And here I am, like sipping a big martini, looks like a martini. And I'm like, I hope no one sees me in my course and thinks I'm not that. I mean, then again, we have a very open-ended system. We have people who are not trying to quit; they're trying to better their lives and whatever. But at the same time, it is a cool time to be alive because I feel like it's part of the zeitgeist. Like holistic health, people who don't have problems are cutting down on drinking, or they're cutting it out. My dad quit years ago when I quit, just as moral support, and then he realized that he liked it better. So I just think what an amazing time to be alive. And I mean, obviously there are problems in the world, but looking at through this lens, it's never been easier to go to a new place, find a really cool yoga studio, or get into martial arts for the first time. It's like I'm excited for anyone who's starting out on this kind of adventure.
Yeah, and tell us how many push-ups does your dad do a day?
He does. I believe it's 500. Last time I checked. He does a number of push-ups, and he has a little bit of range of motion issue from a shoulder injury, but yeah, but it's impressive. And yeah, I mean, he's strong. He's
I
very
love hearing
strong.
about your dad. He sounds just like a super cool dad. Just how he supports you is it's really cool.
He's fantastic. I'm lucky. Both of my parents are awesome, and that was part of me. A huge part of the early process for me of becoming unisolated was just deepening my bonds with my parents. I always knew I had the best parents ever, and I was super lucky. I was adopted at the age of like 6 weeks. But yeah, having people who really care about you genuinely is something that it's easy to take it's easy to take for granted when you're in a alcohol-induced or drug-induced stupor. And then when you get out of that, you can actually take more reward in those genuine connections than you could when you were drinking, for sure. I've heard people say, who are trying to quit, saying, I feel bad because I should be enjoying my daughter's first dance recital, but I can't unless I'm drunk, or, that kind of thing. That's heartbreaking. And it's not that there's something wrong with, and they always assume, well, it's because I'm a bad person, I'm selfish, and I just want to drink. That's what it is. No. Your brain has been recalibrated, and alcohol is monopolizing the pleasure. When you get out of that trap, you then liberate your brain to take pleasure in those things that actually matter.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm so lucky too because I have a very supportive family. My son is amazing. He's seen me through this battle, and so happy to be where I'm at for him and my sister too. And I didn't mention it, but I've also doing your online rehab, Fit Recovery 2.0. It's called.
Yeah, total alcohol recovery.
Yeah, what a great program that is.
Thank you. I'm glad you like it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very in depth. And one of the best things about it is like you're not just giving me some online thing to do, right? I'm doing it, But it's got a good mix of just like video, text, whatever. But you have coaches on there that, you each section you go through, you have to they ask you a question or you're asking a question. What about this? How did you feel here? What do you do? This strategy or whatever. And then you answer the question. And you have coaches that actually reply to you. So it feels like, somebody is with you on the course. And
That's great to hear.
A great aspect.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm really glad that you've enjoyed the Total Alcohol Recovery 2.0. Yeah, I mean, that's something that it's been a work in progress since like 2017. We have Coach Tana and Matt Finch he's been really involved in responding to people in there. And Coach Tana took a little hiatus to have a kid, I think her third child at the moment. And she's actually making a course of her own. So we have some other courses coming in probably the next 6 months or so, by our other fit recovery coaches. So I won't go too much into that, but for anyone who's interested in delving into some of the more specialized things, yeah, I won't mention them right now because the topics might change. I don't want to let anyone down, but basically, like, we try to make the main course almost the A to Z: bio, psychosocial, spiritual. And then, if people want to delve further, right now they can do coaching with one of our coaches. I'm booked at the moment, depending on when someone's watching this. But I'll probably take a bit of a sabbatical in 2023, probably mid this year, actually, to write my book and really try to finish up, scale, and delegate the supplement, which is another work in progress. So we've got a lot going on, but we always love to hear that the program is helpful. And yeah, I think you're doing great. And I think you're a stellar example and an inspiration to a lot of people out there. I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments on this video. I've kind of, in a sense, followed Joe Rogan's advice: don't read the comments. But I have to say that the comments on YouTube on our channel tend to be overwhelmingly positive. Every now and then you get a bot or a strange individual, but most of the time it's really uplifting stuff. People are supporting each other. And it just goes to show, I think there's a really wide community of people out there who are open to this kind of slightly unorthodox, open-ended, open-minded version of what I think traditionally has been a bleak, very black and white, fire and brimstone almost approach.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's revolutionary. I want to use that word.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah. And we need to teach all of the medical doctors in the country about what you profess.
Well, I appreciate that. And I am good friends with Dr. Starr, among other. He's twice board certified in addiction medicine, former ER doctor, I believe. And he's the head medical consultant for Fit Recovery. But he and I we have some plans to maybe make that happen as well. So we'll see. I need people much more qualified than myself, such as him, to help with that. But I think we're on the right track. And from what I can tell, it used to be, even back in 2018, people would say, "Oh, I talked to my doctor and they said, don't do vitamins. They don't work. Here's your drug script." And now it's almost universally, occasionally we get someone who says that, but now it's almost universally like, I talked to my doctor and they said it's very interesting and they want to look into it, which is really nice. And you like to hear that people who are, experts in medicine would be open to nutrients and alternative approaches.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, JohnnyO, it's been great talking to you. I'm sure we'll be in touch. Thank you so much for being on the show. Keep up all the great work down in Hawaii.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for having me. It was great fun. Aloha.
Hey everyone, Chris Scott here. If you liked the information on today's episode regarding supplementation and empowerment strategies for addiction recovery, then please subscribe to the Elevation Recovery Podcast and leave us a rating and review on iTunes. And if you benefited directly from this information, I'm confident in saying that you'll love the information-packed online courses that Matt Finch and I have created. Matt Finch's Ultimate Opiate Detox 4.0 is a 6-module, 30-activity course that contains video lessons, written lessons, PDF downloads, worksheets, audios, and much more. And it has everything you could possibly need to know to conquer opioid addiction in the easiest and most comfortable way possible. My own course, Total Alcohol Recovery 2.0, is the most cutting-edge resource for anyone who wants to transcend alcohol and build their best lives. To get these courses, to learn more, and to read testimonials, simply go to opiateaddictionsupport.com/ultimate. Again, that's opiateaddictionsupport.com/ultimate for Matt's course, or for my course, go to fit-recovery.com/course. Again, that's fit-recovery.com/course. You can also go to elevationrecovery.com to see the show notes for this episode.